And the latest that's coming in from Seoul, India's membership bid to the nuclear suppliers group will be discussed later tonight. NSG members will reconvene for a special session. Urgent items to be taken up at 9 p.m. including India's application. Japanese delegates raised the issue of Indian membership during the plenary deliberations. This is the big story that we are breaking here on India Today. India Today's deputy editor Smita Sharma now joins me live with the latest on the story. So Smita, India's case to be taken up. Japan raised the issue. Bring us the latest.
Well, Gaurav, the NSG delegates, as we have been reporting through the day, they have been really tight-lipped and absolutely not willing to share information. But we do have multiple source confirmation now that India's case is coming up for a hearing. The timing is very interesting. 9 o'clock is when the NSG will reconvene because, these stairs lead up to the halls where the NSG plenary summit was underway today, which started off with the, Korean foreign minister's opening remarks. They have a dinner lined up at around 6:30 this evening. Post, there will be some consultative committee and informal meetings of various groups. But 9 o'clock, all NSG members, that's the big breaking news that we now have on India Today, that all the NSG members will be coming back to discuss India's membership, which was raised actually by Japan amongst some other countries. We are yet to ascertain a few of the other countries that we are told actually raised the issue and supported India's membership bid during the plenary summit, which were, closed door deliberations. They are kept very, very confidential. But clearly, this is important because 7 o'clock local time is here when we will see that meeting happen between Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping at Tashkent. And 2 hours after that, NSG members will be reconvening to discuss India's membership.
This is
a very, very big
interesting. Yes, and Smita, given the fact that China was saying that India's membership is not to come up at all, non-NPT states membership, India-specific membership not to come up at all is what China was saying. So China was all along playing mind games, perhaps in an attempt to deter India from pursuing the matter in the manner in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his team have been pursuing this matter. But they knew better. And yesterday, France also made it very clear, France stands by India. So something was cooking all along. There are mind games being played all along, Smita.
That's true, Gaurav, but I think, we should really hold our horses a little bit at the moment, and it will be better to be a bit more cautious than sounding victorious at this very moment.
No, nobody's sounding victorious, but it's an effort. It's an effort that's on. It's an effort that's on.
It's an effort, but at the end of the day, when you're dealing with the Chinese, things actually can go down to the wires. Things can change every moment. There can be a twist and turn. And in fact, all the sources that I spoke to personally here, they have also cautioned us. What they are saying is that we have listed some urgent items, and New Delhi's membership bid will be one of those urgent items. So they are also trying to not sort of make it sound as if, this is something where China will find itself isolated in a multilateral hall, because that might actually complicate the scenario. So they are willing to give, in fact, all the countries that have issues some breathing space, some space to come and deliberate, to argue. We don't know which way the discussions will go.
Sure.
As of now, we cannot speculate as to, whether the outcome will actually be favorable, or for all we know, the members will decide that at an eventual date in near future, they will take up India's case in much more earnestness. But this is definitely an important development, especially because the Indian delegation here, which is being led by Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar, they've been quiet through the day. They are not members of the NSG, so they were not inside, in fact, that plenary hall. But now that the 9 o'clock meeting will take place here at the Hotel Sheila in Seoul, that will be very closely watched.
Stay with me, Smita. Even as India steps up efforts for this NSG membership, Pakistan is once again trying to stall India's chances of becoming a member of the nuclear suppliers group. Pakistan's President Hussein met Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier today at Tashkent on the sidelines of the SCO summit. Now, during this meeting, the two leaders discussed the NSG. The Pakistani side thanked China for supporting Pakistan's entry to the nuclear suppliers group. Pakistan once again asked China to push Pakistan's case at the NSG. Islamabad has been lobbying against India's NSG bid with China and some other countries. And ahead of the Modi-Xi Jinping meet at Tashkent today, India and China postponed high-level June 27 finance dialogues that were to be held in Beijing. Now, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley is currently on a 5-day visit to China. Indian embassy officials in Beijing have said they will not comment on whether or why the dialogue was postponed, although it comes amidst differences between India and China on India's entry to the nuclear suppliers group. Sources have told India today that the dialogue had to be postponed due to the unavailability of the Union Finance Secretary. He could not travel to Beijing. Arun Jaitley will, however, attend a high-level investment summit in Beijing on Friday. Arun Jaitley will also meet his Chinese counterpart and Chinese Premier Li. Meanwhile, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said it wasn't aware of the details why the meeting was postponed. And India Today's Devina Gupta now joins me for more on this story. Devina, what's the inside story? So, very important India-China finance talks. The finance minister is on his way to is in China, but the finance secretary couldn't make it. So, is there more to it than meets the eye?
Well, first of all, Gaurav, let me tell you that the engagement with the Chinese counterpart of the finance minister Arun Jaitley is still on. That's the first word that has come in from the North Bloc. But as you rightly pointed out, the dialogue of foreign secretaries right now has been deferred. It hasn't been cancelled, but has been deferred for next month. Now, the reason given behind that, as of the moment from the North Bloc, is that Finance Secretary Shaktikanta Das had to stay back in India to look over the Brexit impact on the Indian economy. That's why the dialogue has been postponed, but there is an increased speculation that this dialogue has been postponed given the hard stance that China is taking at the Seoul at the NSG plenary in Seoul, and after that perhaps there could be a revision of engagement as far as bilateral talks on the trade front is concerned. But Gaurav, let's not forget that for India, China is the largest trading partner. Although we have a trade deficit of around $44 billion with China, India needs to swing the trade deficit in its favor, and there needs to be a consultation on a regular basis, and that's why Finance Minister right now is with the who's who of India Inc., who's accompanied him in China on this 5-day visit. So we can't see the two meetings in isolation. There would be an obvious diplomatic push with the India playing the trade card, but will that work or not, we'll have to see after that crucial meeting in Seoul.
Does Prime Minister Narendra Modi have an ace up his sleeve? A very, very crucial meeting in Tashkent taking place in a while from now. These are images from earlier today when Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Uzbekistan. Now I have Dhruv Jaishankar, fellow Foreign Policy, Brookings, India, joining us on the broadcast. Dr. Alka Acharya is Director and Senior Fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies. She joins us on the broadcast. Also with us is Jaidev Ranade, former Additional Secretary of RAW, a man who understands China very well. Alka Acharya, I want to come to you first. Is the Chinese reaction exactly on predictable lines, or can we expect a change as things go down to the wire, like in 2008?
I would not like to make any statement which would prejudge the issue, as it were. And I think the run-up here, we have seen some very interesting developments. However, it is always better to err on the side of caution, and therefore I think we should take what the Chinese have been saying for the last couple of weeks at face value, that they have been talking about technical problems, they have been talking about the NPT issue, they've been talking about the fact that it is not on the agenda. So there is a whole host of things which they have been talking about, which I would like to dim my optimism a bit and hope that, as the External Affairs Minister had said, that the Chinese will play a constructive role in the face of an overwhelming consensus. But
Okay. are they playing a constructive role so far, Dhruv Jaishankar? Dhruv, are the Chinese so far playing a constructive role? Because Chinese talking about, technicalities or criteria more than credentials, and India says, look at credentials more than criteria, even though we appear to fulfill almost all in both, except the NPT.
I think we'll have to see in the next 2 days. Based on Chinese statements in the last few days and few weeks, what I think is clear is that they haven't closed the door on India's entry. They've talked about processual issues, about what might be on the agenda. In fact, I think that statement about it not being on the agenda was somewhat misinterpreted. It was rather China did not think it should be on the agenda, rather than the fact that it wasn't. China isn't the sole country determining what's on the NSG agenda. But so I do think while they are making it difficult for India to enter in an unprecedented manner, more so even than in 2008 when a waiver for India was being discussed at the Nuclear Suppliers Group, that they've also ensured that the door is not completely shut. And so in that sense, President Xi Jinping's meeting with Prime Minister Modi in the next hour or two will actually be quite important in that respect.
So, Jaidev Ranade, what is it that India can tell China and hope to get China on board?
I'll just like to comment on the remarks that have been made just now, and point out essentially that China has been opposed to India getting an upgraded status or getting the bans on it which were imposed earlier after the second test removed, and they have been quite clear about this from the time of the Indo-US civilian nuclear agreement, and they have been pushing the case of Pakistan.
Yes.
The other factor that is new relatively this time round is the relationship between China and Pakistan, which has been elevated to an extremely high level, to the extent that China now describes Pakistan as its only ally and friend. I think that needs to be taken note of. It's not just a question of Pakistan lobbying China, but both are working on this together, as they have been colluding to prevent India's entry into the UN Security Council. Now, as far as the NSG is concerned, China has, if one looks at its statements over the last couple of months, they have varied. They have shifted the goalposts, as it were, after a particular kind of statement saying that they're opposed to India getting in. India has done nothing to qualify it from getting into the Nuclear Suppliers Group. Then it comes down to making exceptions for one country, etc. Then it came to getting both in at the same time. So China has been changing its changing the kind of objection that it has raised, but it has always left a door open, and that is typically Chinese. I think what they will see is how many countries are going to vote in favor, and if it means spoiling their relationships with either the United States or ensuring or bringing about a permanent strain on India-China relations, then they might pull back. Otherwise, they will try to use surrogates like Turkey, etc., to try and block India if they can get away with it.
So what are options for India at this stage? I have Commodore Uday Bhaskar who joins me on the broadcast. Commodore Bhaskar, what can Prime Minister Narendra Modi tell President Xi Jinping to get him on board? And is that almost impossible given China would look for what it stands to gain, perhaps more, by blocking India than letting India be a part of the club?
Gaurav, I would say that in terms of the options for India, one is to take the normative route, meaning that all the members of the NSG and the entire global community today is very concerned about the challenge of nuclear proliferation and the link with non-state entities, terrorism, and what is often seen as a worst-case scenario. So the normative part, or what would be the most desirable, is to try and flag what you might call as a common good, something that affects the entire global community, countries like India, China, Russia in particular. There's hardly any major country today that does not exude this anxiety about weapons of mass destruction, non-state entities, terrorism, deviant state, and so on. So that's one way of pitching it. But my own sense is that it's not that China is unaware about all these exigencies, yet they have chosen to arrive at a geopolitical determination that they would not enable India. And as has just been pointed out, it is not so much about the merits of the case, because China really does not have any consistent position. They have tended to look at which is the most convenient quote-unquote red herring. For instance, the suggestion that India has not signed the NPT. Now that's a complete non-starter, because as has been often pointed out, when the NSG was formed in the mid-1970s,
Yes.
France was a state with nuclear weapons.
And anyway,
Yet
NPT,
it was not a signatory.
NPT is a directive. It is not mandatory for a country, as you're rightly pointing out. So, Alka Acharya, is China trying to stop India's entry using all these excuses, including excuses like Pakistan, given how different both the track records of both the countries are as far as nuclear non-proliferation are concerned, ma'am?
No, you see, the spotlight is clearly on China, because it is one of the P5, and along with the other 4 members, they really constitute what we may call the managers of the non-proliferation order. And I think we need to understand that there is a fair degree of conversation that goes on among them also. So China becomes obviously the one on which the spotlight is, because it is very clearly taking a stand against giving a waiver to India on merit. I mean, they are talking in terms of the technicalities. And in fact, if we put it in a broader context, I mean, the fact that Prime Minister Modi went to so many countries, it was clearly that it was not just China alone, that there were still many countries. Now, China, as I said, takes the spotlight because it is one of the most prominent countries which are opposing India, and there is the entire dynamics of the Pakistani angle and so on, so that makes it far more controversial scenario out here. But we must also remember that it's not just, if it was just China alone like it happened earlier, possibly at the last minute you could see some kind of developments take place, some more discussion, and it pushes through. But there are other countries as well, and we would be, we need to take on board the fact that there could be opposition which the Chinese are working on. I mean, it's not just that countries are ready to fall in line with China just because China is saying it. So clearly there are concerns about this question of NPT.
No, but are these genuine concerns? I mean, given China's track record on proliferation, given Pakistan's track record on proliferation, and China's friendship with Pakistan, so NPT just looks like an excuse to stall India's growth story. I want Dhruv to answer that. But before that, for a moment, I want to come to Devina, because Devina, you have this chart on who's supporting India and who's not. Take it away, Devina.
Well, thanks, Gaurav. What we're looking at, the last mile push by India to enter the 48-member elite club. Here we have on how Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar is in Seoul to push India's bid. Now, remember, there is a special NSG meet which has been scheduled for tonight, as per the sources, and there he would be going all out already to get other nations on board. If we can also flip this graphic and see that he was supposed to fly out with the Prime Minister to Tashkent, but he's been given the task of getting all the other nations on board and get that crucial green signal for India's entry in the NSG. Now, Jaishankar is speaking to all the NSG members, especially those who are still opposed. So it will be now a matter of how the other countries are able to build the consensus against China. And as we've been talking about it, if China is isolated in its opposition, there are chances that they will also come on board, like what we saw in 2008. Now, also this meeting, which is set to be with the Prime Minister and the Chinese President in at 3:30 p.m. just few minutes from now, is where the Prime Minister will be opening another front for getting the Chinese on the board with Xi Jinping, who's also there in Tashkent at the moment. And also 3 rounds of informal discussions have been held on membership of non-NPT members. So will this be a big political scoring card for the Prime Minister this season is also what everybody is watching out for. And let's not forget there is another front
Yes.
that Sushma Swaraj has spoken to representatives of 30 countries, and I can also tell you, Gaurav, the fourth front that has been opened by the finance minister, where he's engaging with the Chinese businessmen and also expected to meet the Chinese finance minister to ensure that there is a surround push from four sides to corner China into accepting India's NSG bid.
Okay, Anant Krishnan joins us from Beijing. Anant's our correspondent there. Anant, does the Chinese president, I mean, given the line China has already taken, so does President Xi Jinping have the kind of bandwidth to turn around to support India if you know, like Hu Jintao did in 2008 after George Bush spoke to him then? Or do we see some kind of a forward movement in some way that it's not a face saver for, it's a face saver for both sides?
Well, Gaurav, there was an interesting comment from the Chinese Foreign Office just about an hour ago where they were speaking about the meeting that's going to take place between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping. They said that they felt that the NSG was an issue that wouldn't really have an impact on bilateral ties, which leaves you wondering if perhaps they have underestimated how much India is investing into the NSG, which is why I'm inclined to think that the postponement of the dialogue on Monday, even though a very bureaucratic reason is being given, whether that's a message that India is saying that, well, it cannot be business as usual if this is a core interest of India and China isn't playing ball. So it depends on whether Prime Minister Modi, if he's going to be impressing that message to Xi Jinping, and whether he accepts that is what remains to be seen. But having said that, it is a big question if China has taken a public stand over the last 5-6 days. As powerful as Xi Jinping is, it's still a little unlikely that he would sort of snap his fingers and the entire, the Chinese position would be turned around by 180 degrees. So as you said, that's where a face-saving sort of out comes into the question. So if we can get some sort of agreement on this criteria that they've been talking about before Seoul concludes, and if this paves the way for India's entry, if not tomorrow, to the next 2-3 months, well, perhaps that's something that both sides may find acceptable.